Ellen or Nellie Larkins was born on New Year's Eve in 1873 at Bundarra in New South Wales. She was the first child and daughter of John Larkins and his wife Margaret McMahon, both assisted immigrants from Ireland. Ellen was 17 when her father passed away in April 1891, and shortly after she was employed as a pupil teacher at Bundarra Public School. Ellen was successfully promoted to Class 1 and 2 roles before being declared eligible for appointment to a small school. However, 6 years later, in 1897, Ellen indicated that she wished to resign from her role as she intended to marry. Her resignation was accepted in March 1898, shortly before she married John Sketchley, a police constable stationed at Bundarra on the 26th of April in 1898. Shortly after, Ellen became pregnant and gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth Dorothy Sketchley, on the 15th of January 1899. Sadly, baby Elizabeth passed away 1 month later on the 15th of February. The Armidale Express at the time reporting that I'm sorry to have to record the death of the infant child of Mrs. Sketchley, which took place last week. Much sympathy is felt for the bereaved parents. I'm not sure what the cause of baby Elizabeth's death was, but the newspaper at the time also reported an outbreak of measles. By April that year, John had been transferred to Dalmorton, a township on the Boyd River between Grafton and Glen Innes. The population of Dalmorton was around 200 people, and a previous mining boom was waning. There was a police station at Dalmorton, and the village was also the site of a local police court. In addition to being a police constable, John was also appointed as the acting clerk of petty sessions at Dalmorton on the 17th of May in the same year. Nellie was pregnant again by the time they arrived in Dalmorton and gave birth to a son, John Henry Sketchley, on the 9th of December in 1899. What should have been an incredibly happy time in a remote area turned to tragedy very quickly. Profound regret was expressed in town on Wednesday when the intelligence reached here that Mrs. Sketchley had passed away on the previous Saturday after a few hours' illness at Dalmorton. In fact, the first intimation that her unfortunate mother received was the fact of her daughter being dead and buried. The late Mrs. Sketchley was a native of this town and was only 28 years old at the age of her demise. Very few residents of Bundarra and district, but will remember the pleasant and agreeable countenance of the late Mrs. Sketchley, Nellie Larkins, who during her unmarried life was engaged as a pupil teacher in the public school here. She endeared herself to the pupils under her and their parents. In fact, no one could be found who could truthfully say a wrong word of poor Nellie, as she was familiarly called amongst her companions. Much sympathy is expressed for her poor mother, who was almost prostrate with grief. Tragically, little baby John also passed away a short 2 months later on the 9th of February 1900 and is buried with his mother at Dalmorton, one of only 3 remaining headstones in the cemetery. By April that year, the bereaved John had transferred from Dalmorton and he went on to marry again. 2 years later, in 1902, he had 3 children with his second wife, Eleanor Mackenzie, and passed away in 1955, aged 90. I'm not related to this family, however, I visit Dalmorton often with my family, and I've always been taken by the sadness of a lonely grave for a mother and her babe, and I thought I would share their story.